All right, welcome to another Shipyard vlog from the steamship Virginia 5. And this video I think is going to be kind of a fun one because this is one of my favorite topics about wooden boats, and that is going to be the process of corking the hull. Corking, also pronounced caulking because that's how it's spelled, is the process of pounding cotton and oakum into the seams of all of these new hull planks in order to make the seams watertight. I will be saying corking during this video because that is the more common pronunciation here in the Pacific Northwest, where the Virginia 5 is. So you can see we have all of these lovely new hull planks that have been put on. And to keep the water out from between all of the seams, we will be pounding in cotton and oakum. You can see here some new hull planks along with the old hull planks. A shipwright has come along and reefed out the old material from the seams back about a foot and left tails hanging out so we can tie in the new material. So here is a better look at a piece of one of our hull planks, and you can see there is a bevel in the top seam. This is the corking bevel, which you saw them putting in if you watched our video on hull planking. The bevel extends about 2/3 the way into the plank. So on the inside of the ship, all of these planks should touch each other. And then on the outside we have the gap for admitting the cotton and the oakum. These are the basic tools of the trade. We have cotton here. Cotton is the first thing that goes in. On small ships it might be the only material you need. A basic rule is 1 thread of material for each inch of hull thickness. The Virginia 5 has hull planks that are 2.5 inches thick, so we do 3 threads. The first is always going to be cotton, and then we will pound in 2 threads of oakum on top. This is oakum. It is a hemp fiber that is impregnated with pine tar. You can see here, this is a piece of hull plank that got removed, but it still has its corking intact. You can see 3 layers of corking in here, cotton, 2 oakum, and then there's a filler on top. And you can see it extends about 2/3 the way into the seam. The other tools we have here, we have a corking mallet, and this is a very specialized kind of mallet specifically for this task. It is wooden, so we are not pounding metal on metal all day long. And it is weighted, so you can sit and swing it constantly for hours straight. Then we have our corking irons, and these are what is used to actually drive the material into the seams. They come in a wide variety of widths for different widths of seams. It's pretty common for a corker to have several different irons with them at all times because seams tend to vary in width as you go. Alright, so there are a few different ways to hold a corking iron. This is my preferred way, with sort of my pinky up over the end for control, and then I have my forefinger pressed against the blade to help hold the material against the blade. But the exact grip on an iron is kind of corker's preference, and you'll see a few different methods displayed here in this video. But before we actually start the corking process, we need to prepare the hull seams. So this is a brand new hull seam. You can see it's been painted with boat sauce, which is pine tar, turpentine, and linseed oil. And before we apply the corking, we are going to need to smooth out these seams so that there's no burrs to catch the material. So I've got a piece of sandpaper here, and you just run that through the whole seam, and then also want to round off the edges of the planks so they don't catch the material. Then you need to clean out the seams so that there's no sawdust or other debris from the work stuck in the seams. A really easy way to do this is with compressed air. So a compressed air hose run along the hull just blasts out anything that might be in the hull seams. And now we are ready to start corking. So we're starting here with cotton and tying the cotton into an old tail of cotton from one of the seams that did not get replaced. You just go along taking little tucks of material and giving it a quick tap. The size of the tuck you take will depend both on the thickness of your material as well as the width of the seam. A wide seam might require larger tucks, a narrow seam smaller tucks. Also, if your strand of material gets really thin, you might need to put in more tucks into a smaller gap of space. After doing 6 inches to a foot, you'll go back in with the iron and pound it deeper into the seam until none of the material sticks out. Now, I am a pretty slow corker when I do this, but if you're someone who has several decades of experience, this can go quite quickly, which is good because a ship like the Virginia 5 has several miles of seams on the hull, and again, you have to go over it all 3 times. Once all of the cotton is in the seams, it is time for another coat of boat sauce. And the boat sauce is going to help preserve the cotton and also help all of the fibers lay flat so that they don't puff back up. Once all the cotton in it is time to break out the oakum. However, oakum is not ready to use straight from the box. We do have to process it. Oakum is prepared for corking using a process called spinning. So you can see we have the oakum here. It comes out of the package as kind of a very compressed fiber. We take these strands and rip them in half lengthwise because they're too thick as they come out of the package. So just go down a good, couple fathoms of this stuff, ripping along lengthwise. And then the spinning process begins. So spinning is a fairly simple concept. I like to have a thing of burlap over your thigh. This helps protect your skin from all the pine tar in this stuff and also provides a good rough surface for friction. So you can see that Kent here is gently stretching the strands of oakum. This gets all of the fibers to kind of align with each other and then giving it a real brisk rub against his thigh. This is where the term spinning comes from. This turns this compressed dreadlock-like fiber into more of a rope-like fiber, which is much easier to work with. Shipwrights will often spend more time spinning than they actually do on the hull corking because even 30 or 40 feet of this material gets used up pretty quick during the corking process. But sitting and spinning oakum is a great chance for shipwrights to sit and share sea stories for a few hours, or to just let their backs rest from corking on the hull.
Yeah, it's going to be late.
Spinning is often a good task for the end of the day when you're sick of standing outside on the scaffolding, pounding material into the hull.
I want to take a look at just unspun section versus a spun section. Yeah, hold them side by side. Sweet.
Yeah.
And then it is back out to the ship to start pounding in the second thread of oakum. Oakum is pounded into the hull the same way as the cotton is. Just going to sit with the iron and with the mallet, and just take little tucks each time and pound it into the seam. So pounding the material in further is also a bit of a technique. I found it easiest to do very small increments at a time. You just sort of rock the iron along the seam a few millimeters each time, giving it a good pound so that it just sucks itself deeper into that seam. So here's a close-up look of a seam that has been corked. Now, we need this material to get much deeper into this seam. This is actually the second thread of oakum, so this has 1 thread of cotton and 2 threads of oakum into it. Now, the material in a corked seam should be as deep into the seam as the seam is wide. And the best way to make up that material and get it nice and set deeply into the seam is a process called beetling. So here we see some of our corking tools. We have mallets and an array of irons, but then we also have a much larger mallet and much larger irons. So that's our beetling mallet and the horsing irons. Horsing irons are kind of like caulking irons, but they are on a very long handle. They also come in a variety of different widths so that you can change depending on the width of the seam. And the idea here is that one person presses the horsing iron into the seam and the other person whacks it really hard with the beetling mallet. And they are going to make their way along every single seam of the ship, again, a few millimeters at a time, pounding that material as deep as they possibly can. So bumping the seams like this is done after each thread of oakum. So with 2 threads of oakum, this bumping process is done to all of the seams twice. You can see that the handle allows the iron to be rocked back out of the seam gently after it has been pounded in so that you don't get it stuck. The irons can also be rotated on their handles so that you can do all of the butts.
Right at the top.
So we're going to have a look back into the seams I showed you earlier after the bumping process has been complete. So now that it has been bumped, you can see just how deep that material has been driven. Again, we want the oakum to be as deep into the seam as the seam is wide. That ensures it is set nice and tightly. So once the ship is put into the water, all of the wood of the hull is going to swell a little bit, and that is going to mash all of this material very, very firmly into that seam, creating a watertight seal. Now, corking isn't just for hulls, it is also for decks. So now we are up here on the fantail, which also got redecked this hull out. And this is also getting corked with cotton and with oakum. It is the same process as doing a hull, though slightly different body ergonomics because you're working on a deck as opposed to sort of at shoulder height or above you on the hull. Very handy for this is to have knee pads or to have a little rolling stool to sit on, because you're going to spend a lot of hours bent over doing this. An interesting challenge is corking the new trim boards that have been put in on the fantail. This is a bent iron, which is for driving material in between two planks that are uneven. You can see we had to put down a piece of cardboard over the non-skid of the rub rail so that it wouldn't rip up the cotton as it's getting pounded in. Now, the final step is going to be to put in the filler material. As I said earlier, we've gotten the cotton and the oakum as deep into the seam as the seam is wide, and that means that there is a gap on top of the material that needs to be filled. A very traditional way of doing this is with tar. We tar the deck seams on the Virginia 5. So just melting hunks of tar on a heater over here, and then we have the tar applier for pouring tar into the seams. This is extremely messy. Once the tar has cooled and hardened, someone does have to go back in with a scraper and scrape up all of the tar that has gotten everywhere and make it look nice and pretty. Fortunately for us, most of the decks on the Virginia 5 are painted, so this is all going to get painted over, and that means we don't have to do nearly as much cleaning. The deck seams inside of the ship also get tarred. So this is the new seam between the deck and the new covering board that went in one of the previous videos. For inside the ship, we did put down some tape just to help contain the mess, but you do still have to go back in with a scraper and scrape up all of the dried tar later. Out on the hull of the Virginia 5, we do not use tar. We instead have some different materials. Now the first step here is going to be to just brush paint into all of the finished seams. This is above the waterline, so it's getting white paint. Seams below the waterline get red hull paint. So we have a finished seam here, painted and ready for filling. Above the waterline, our filler of choice is going to be painter's putty. So this stuff gets applied into the seams. These seams above the waterline only get wet intermittently because they are above the waterline most of the time. It's nice and dry in the sun, and then suddenly the ship goes out, or we get some waves or some seas, and suddenly they get wet. So the painter's putty here is nice and flexible and can handle the seams swelling and contracting depending on humidity and weather. Remember that this putty is not what is making this seam watertight. What is making the seam watertight is the cotton inside. The putty here is just to help fill the remainder of the seam and protect the material inside of the seam from getting damaged or from getting fungus or anything infecting it. Now, below the waterline, our material of choice is going to be Portland cement. So, been using cement on the hull of the ship for a very long time. You just apply it kind of like spackling a house. So, cement is used to fill all of the seams below the waterline. It is also used to fill in all of the bolt holes. So, all of these countersunk bolts are just going to have a bunch of cement stuffed into the holes there and sanded smooth later. Using the cement does not leave air gaps the way that driving in bungs might. All right, so the hull on this side is just about done. Just putting in the cement on all the seams and over all of the bolts. Then it will be ready for hull painting. So, hope you enjoyed watching this video on corking techniques. Be sure to tune in next time as we finish work on the Virginia 5. You can visit the ship's website at www.virginiav.org to help support the work being done on the ship,